Thank you, Stacey. This is Chris Polek with Polek and Polek, and thank you for joining us for the webinar today. Once Wes gets started, it'll probably be about 30 to 45 minutes, depending on how long questions go after, just to give you, an idea on the time frame. But do you ever notice those times when ideas are suggested for change that our minds immediately go to how that can't work? And something new we're seeing talked about in our industry that's hotly debated today is a flat rate, no-click billing program. And think a little bit about some of these services that we all use. Cable, cell phone. Many of you dealers are selling managed network services. And they're all flat rate monthly subscriptions for cost certainty. So is it any surprise when it comes to print that those customers would ask if they could buy it the same way? Going back about 30 years ago, there was a similar change going on in the industry like this. And I don't know if many people on the line were in the industry 30 years ago or they weren't. I certainly know I was, and also Wes was. But there was a new form of billing going around called cost per copy. And, when that first was proposed to people, immediately they were saying it can't work. Pundits said it was doomed to fail. And today, this is the standard way that dealerships do business. But at the beginning, this was very scary. 30 years ago, the amount of data that was available was a sliver of what it is today. And today, it's simpler to construct a flat rate, no-click program with the data that's available now. So you're going to get a sneak peek of what Wes will show you about the over 3 million devices that his company monitors. And, change is very scary. I don't recommend a scary big risk like jumping off a high dive. I do recommend experimenting with minimal risk. And after watching this webinar and maybe sharing the recording with some other team members at your dealership, I think you're going to be able to come away to answer the questions of, where would a program like flat rate billing work? And, what model devices would work with a one-way program? Once you see that, you can, perhaps the next step for you would be to find a client or two that looks like a fit and experiment with it. See what you learn and make some adjustments to improve it. By the end of 2019, you want to be in the position where you can say, we know who and where a flat rate, no-click billing program works. We're prepared for it. And if a customer asks us for a flat rate option, we're ready to present a program like that. So when we suggest radical change, our instinct is to resist and justify how it won't work. But when we experiment, we take some smaller risks, see the possibilities, and believe there are alternatives. And then we implement the actions that make a difference. So I'm going to ask all of you to put your experimenter hats on, get ready to listen to Wes, and prepare your dealership for future success. So now I'm going to hand it over to the one and only Wes McArtor.
Thank you very much, Chris. Welcome, everyone. So some of you might not know who Nexera is. It's actually a rebranding that we just undertook and announced at iTech this year. Obviously, many of you have heard of BEI Services. We've been around now for 26 years, primarily focused on service analytics and solutions. We just merged with a company called Business Systems Consulting to give our customers an opportunity to get all of their solutions addressed in one place. So rather than just being focused on service as we have for the last 26 years, we now have the ability to look at sales and improving sales effectiveness with dashboards and virtual sales manager opportunities to help have an outside third-party objective view of what's going on in your company, so that it can kind of remove some of the, I won't say politics, but the issues that come from people wanting to protect their specific area of expertise from outside scrutiny. We also do that with finance. We have virtual CFO offerings along with financial consulting to help improve cash flow and help manage the financial aspects of the dealership. Obviously, service is what we do best and have done this for a long time. We also are experts now in ECI Compass Sherpa, so we can do a lot of cleanup and a lot of processes that no one else can do in managing that ERP and helping you with that process. So as Chris said, everybody's kind of aware of the changes in the market. We sense it, we feel it, we've been hearing about it. Not everybody is seeing it hit their bottom line just yet, but it's happening. Print volumes are declining. We see it in our data year over year. Some of this is related to the fact that we are acquiring through our managed print services offerings lower volume devices. But when we look at it by segment class and separate those out, the average monthly volume per unit is going down. Now, you don't always see that, especially because if you have base minimums built in, the decline has to substantially fall. It's falling below the base, but you're not seeing it in revenue because it's hitting your base. But year over year, we're seeing these declines happen. IDC and Gartner Group are all kind of documenting the same thing. So we're in a declining deliverable. So diversification and finding ways of changing the way we do business is critical. Now, it's kind of interesting that we're in a market segment where our deliverable is tied to page volume. Our page volume is declining, and the first place we diversify is document management solutions that teaches customers how to print less. So we're actually trying to create a situation where we're reducing the amount of the deliverable that we sell and make money on. So we've got to figure out ways of kind of stemming the bleeding and trying to figure out how do we adjust accordingly with that decline. And so hopefully I'll be able to make the case of why I think this is possible. Now, this slide, while rather busy, is really here to point out some very specific trends that are going on in our business. So for those of you that are BEI customers, you'll see and recognize the segment classes. For those of you that aren't, this is basically just breaking out machines in different segment classes. So you have the 70 series happen to be the color machines. CPs are color printers, so they're the printer A4 only type devices. The D1s are black and white only A3s. The PR1s are black and white A4s. The key to this slide is that looking at our population, almost 40% of all of the machines installed are running less than 1,200 pages a month. Now, even within a specific segment class, that doesn't mean that they aren't running more. But if you were to look at D4, for example, you'll see there's 108,000 devices averaging only 1,500 pages a month. These are segment 4, that's 60 copy a minute and up devices. In the next volume tier, there's another 70,000 doing 4,500 pages a month, then 44,000 doing 8,300 pages a month. The reason I point this slide out is that among the many fears that people have about doing device as a service is the fact that customers are going to run away with volume. What our case is that for a significant amount of the population, in this case almost 75%, they're not running enough volume that even if they did run away, it would cause you significant financial harm because their page volumes are already too low to start with. So this slide also is indicative of what we've been saying for the last couple of years, is that we tend to oversell everything, meaning that we're being pressured by manufacturers and our current sales comp models to try to sell the highest dollar device we can convince the customer that we can sell them, when in fact there are much smaller products, much cheaper products that can do the same volume much more reliably. So when you look at, for example, CP1, that's a color standalone A4 device. There's 15,000 of those units and they're only averaging 72 pages a month. So it's obvious to me that we're in a declining deliverable in which we need to start being a little more customer centric and a little less hardware centric in the way we promote these devices. But the point here is also that I would not necessarily suggest that you put device as a service in every environment. I don't think print for pay, production print are applications there. We already know how bad they abuse us when you look at 11 by 17 is one click. So we know that that's not necessarily a good place for that. There might be some situations where school districts or other particular environments where device as a service does not work. But we believe that 70 to 80% of your customer base is a valid application for device as a service because A, we already know what their volume is. Two, we know that that operators in general don't know how they're being billed, and they print what they need to print and they copy what they need to copy, and they're not technically aware of how you bill them. And that's what this is. It's a switch in the billing method. So it's really important that we look at the data and realize that most of the equipment we have in the field are running volumes that are very, very appropriate for device as a service. But before you enter into this idea or this change of billing method, I think it's really critical we start taking and having a candid conversation about cost control and how poor we are as an industry at doing it. We've been in this industry doing this for 26 years, and it absolutely astounds me how customers tolerate the way we do service. So if you went to take the car service analogy, if you took a car to go get it repaired, and it took you on average 3 times to go back to get the first problem resolved correctly, you most likely wouldn't use that dealership. But it's pretty normal in our industry and pretty accepted by our customer base. And this slide kind of represents that. So on average, when we look at return for parts, we know because the average technician works on as many as 800 potential models, there's no way they're going to carry 100% of the parts they need. So we set a goal of 12%. When you look at the average dealer, and I broke this down by size so that you're not assuming that, oh, this doesn't apply to me because I'm a small dealer, I'm a medium-sized dealer, or a large dealer, it's different. In reality, 17 to 20% of the service calls that happen will end up creating an additional call to go back for parts. But the top 20% of our dealers have significantly reduced that, almost by half in most cases. Callback's another issue. Again, we don't expect technicians to get to 100%. There's just simply too much variety there, but our goal is 20 to 25. The typical dealer is in the high 30s, low 40s. The top 20% are in the 20s. So we really have to focus on how can we reduce cost in order to maintain the margins that we're used to getting. Accountable time, another severe problem for most of us, in the fact that we really take technicians and go, we know that their job, they only produce revenue when they're out either driving to or working on a machine. We know that there's going to be sick time, travel time, meetings, come for parts, whatever. So our goal is only 85%. But when you look at the average dealer, they're mostly in the mid 70s, mid to high 70s. But in our top 20%, they've actually exceeded that goal and gotten into the high 90s. And that's simply taking a technician and going, I need you to either be traveling to or working on a piece of equipment the vast majority of your day. So those are some critical components that I think we all have to get much more serious about. We've had the luxury of good margins, even with this built-in inefficiency. And I think that if with a little bit of discipline, we can get better and maintain those margins so they don't slide quite as much as they've been doing. Another reason for device as a service is meters are a problem. Everybody knows it. We see that when we do rebilling, we do all of the costs associated with meter billing. So this is just a sample dealer for one of the reports that we generate that outlines the typical meter error percentages. So service meters for this particular company were about 22%. The average is between 15 and 18. Billing meters for this particular dealer was 13%. The average is between 10 and 12 or so. You would think that with the DCAs and the different tools available for meter billing, that would be 0, but it's not. And when you look at it by type, you'll see pretty much the reasons why. So in the service events, it's typically somebody fat fingers a meter when they go to put it in. Most of the time it's just lazy. 3,400 times the tech just didn't put in a meter. So it was blank at this particular location. No progress means it was the same as the last one. Less than the previous one is, again, another potential missed key entry work. You don't see the same thing in billing. In billing, it tends to be no progress, means that for some reason we failed to get a meter, so we billed it at the same as the previous one, or 0. You will see a few that are less than the previous. That's usually because of estimates. And then a few that are unrealistically high. But this has an impact on our ability to get out a proper invoice. And it also affects the customer experience because then they are forced to reconcile. And sometimes they're the ones catching the error because they see the invoice change dramatically. And that raises a whole bunch of questions and conversations that are probably better not had if you could avoid it. Another key thing is why page volume really impacts cost. Now, a lot of dealers that we've talked to have been dabbling in device as a service, and their primary way of getting there is just taking their service CPC rates and multiplying it times an estimated page volume and going, that's what it is. But that can be a dangerous component. So I picked a single model. This is digital segment 4 or black and white segment 4A3. When you look at where this particular model of machine is placed in volumes, the vast majority, or 1,100 machines, are placed in a volume that's only less than 5,000 pages a month, so 0 to 4282. And the cost, excluding supplies, this is parts and labor, at $60 an hour with a penny 5. As you move up the volume bands, you'll see that cost dramatically reduce. And so if you happen to place one of these machines in a device as a service with an average of, just say, pick a number, and it's going into that first volume tier, your cost is a penny 5, but you're selling it for substantially less. So it's really critical to consider what volume environment these machines work in. And as I show you the tool, it will actually bring this to even a higher level of visibility, because it will show you exactly what each machine costs for that specific volume. What we believe is that customers are buying an output. They're getting a machine from you specifically to do one thing, and that's to create a printed page. Sometimes it's to scan as well, but ultimately it's the printed page. And what we need to be conscious of is what machine will print that page with the best potential margin, with the highest level of reliability for that particular customer. Instead, we tend to pick it by the machine that we get the best deal on or the best rebate from the manufacturer on, and which one's going to create the greatest opportunity for compensation for sales, which seems to be somewhat at odds with what the customer's experience is supposed to be. Another thing to consider, as I mentioned in the slide when I talk about cost control, is the variation. So I picked 18 of our current customers for the exact same model that I referenced in that prior slide to show you how cost per page varies dealership to dealership. So the best dealer in our group was servicing that machine, parts and labor, not supplies, at 00236. The worst is at 009. So unless you know exactly where you are in this spectrum, device as a service can be dangerous because you've now fixed the price. Now, it's true that it's semi-fixed on a cost per copy basis, but we build in escalators. We have overages that protect us somewhat from that. So it's still happening, but I think it's just more critical when we do device as a service to isolate out where our cost inefficiencies are. Because if we can fix the revenue stream, then figure out how to reduce cost, we increase margins. So it's real critical to get this process working at the same time as you implement a device as a service type strategy. So can it be done? We believe emphatically yes. We think that customers in general hate meter billing. The dealerships that we've been beta testing this program on have said time and time again, customers were actually willing to take a price increase to get off of meter billing. So they're actually getting 5 or 10% more revenue from the customer just for the benefit of removing that pain point of meter billing. We know that meter billing incurs costs. So you have personnel associated with meter costs, you have meter acquisition costs, you have all of the errors and rebills and customer conversations that happen as a function of that. So this iDaaS program gives your customer a single cost that can easily be budgeted for. And then more importantly, it can be bundled into your other user-based products, whether that's IT, water, shredders, whatever. We actually believe that there's margin in the mystery, meaning the more you can bundle together, the harder it is for your competition to unbundle it and understand exactly what those cost basis is from. but you have to start at the device level. Unlike managed IT services, our products consume something. They consume toner. So they consume parts. So we have to be able to calculate out what that device cost is. Once you know that cost, you can roll it up into any flavor of that model, whether that's user-based, seat-based, whatever the terminology you want to use. But ultimately, we need to understand what our device cost is first so that we can roll that up into that offering. We really think those early adopters will see better bottom lines. Obviously, the race to the bottom, like we've seen in CPC and cost per page, can't happen until everybody's doing it. So I think that early adopters will have the benefit of presenting a new message and a new experience to customers that they will ultimately be willing to pay extra for, and hopefully differentiate you in your marketplace from the ones that don't want to change. They want to keep everything exactly the same and the status quo. So we really think there's an opportunity for those early adopters. We also think there's a very valid strategy when you look at your competitors' base of the message of going to those customers and showing them how they've been oversold and how you can offer them a better experience with either a properly placed A3, A4, and no meter billing. That's a pretty strong argument. We have been hearing, obviously, one of the manufacturers is out there promoting a program. Most of our dealers have been coming to us going, how do I compete with this? Because they're out there saying it's going to be a flat rate. The challenge with the manufacturers is that their flat rate program does not typically take into account volume. It's one price that covers whatever the volume is. And they've done an actuary table that indicates, oh, some customers will run less, some will come more, and the averages will make it. We believe we can beat them virtually every time because our program is much more surgical. It's very specific about the volume requirement that the customer is asking you for. You can build in and pad that if you want to. So just like a customer where we bill them a 500-page minimum or a 1,000-page minimum, you can do the same thing in this model. You just simply pad the volume expectation by that amount and you get it there. So one of the other things that happens and why we think our program is strong is you need good data to make this calculation. There are going to be cases where A, you don't have a significant population of a machine to make that judgment call. Two, a new model comes out and nobody has a lot of data on it yet. So as our database builds, we'll have much better information and a higher confidence level to make sure that you're going to get the price at an expected margin. And I'll demonstrate that for you here in a moment. But it's also very volume specific. So it already has built in for your margins, parts, labor, and supplies, and it will highlight for you what's best fit. So when you look at this, you'll be able to actually see all of the models that are capable of doing a page volume for that specific product type and which one does it the most efficiently from a cost perspective. Because I think that's really key when it comes to making sure we're doing a right fit for these customers. So can it be done? Obviously, I mentioned that it can, but I think there's some common questions and concerns. I've mentioned some of them already. One of the #1 feedback items I get in this presentation is customers are going to run away with print or copy because they're not paying for page. While I think that is true, there will be some customers that will abuse you. I think it's very simple and straightforward to build in fair play clauses into a contract that simply says, we're estimating that you're going to do 2,500 pages a month. That's what you're contracting to do with us. If that page volume increases by a certain amount, we have the right to readjust the contract. So to offset that difference. You can also do it through audit. So you simply build in the clause that says increases in toner consumption or page volume in excess of 10%, will give us the right to adjust the contract for the remainder of the term. So I think that's a common and very easy sellable process so that you can protect yourself for those particular overages. Some are real concerned that customers are going to start printing photo albums now that they're not paying for color. Again, page volume is declining overall. The assumption that just because we changed the billing model, that trend is going to reverse itself, I think is probably misplaced. Will there be some? Absolutely. But I truly believe that the cost associated with meter billing, as we remove that cost from the back end, we will offset the small number of customers that could theoretically abuse us. And with the appropriate audits and fair play clauses in the contract, I think we can adjust for that without too much problem. What about escalations? We've seen multiple versions of this. We've had multiple dealers now that have built in an escalation over the term of the contract, averaged it out and built it in at the front end. So the customer's not actually seeing any escalations, but it is built in at the rate up front. We actually think there's probably a different way of spinning this, in that we can actually put in a flat rate model and then get more aggressive about how we do document management solutions or rules-based printing, and do what we've always been doing, which is figuring out how to help the customer print less, which is going to create more margin because we've got the revenue fixed. So it's, rather than unnecessarily building in an escalation, we're just going to reduce cost and then leave the rate the same so the customer's not seeing that price increase. So we think that's one way. We also think that there's some customers where we've seen substantial enough print volume reductions that you might end up being able to rebate the customer or lower their monthly rate in order to keep them, by showing them as a partner, you're in this for the long haul of improving their experience with your company. Obviously, existing customers are pretty straightforward. If you're the average dealership and 90% of your sales is to existing customers, you already have history, you already have volume trends, you already have all of that information. So converting them to a flat rate model is not a dramatic process because you already know what the costs are, you already know what the volumes are. So that's relatively straightforward. Where it gets complicated is new customer acquisitions, MPS, and obviously trying to capture your competition space. We think document management has a great play in this strategy because it is about helping the customer print less. So if you have a document management strategy, whether that's PaperCut, Square9, or any other tools that you might use, you might want to consider the idea that you really got to get aggressive on a DaaS product first, then get aggressive about document management, so that you're not taking out revenue that you already own and reducing that through these solutions. So I think it's real critical that we think about that as a function of how we go forward. The tool is actually pretty straightforward. It allows for multiple options here. You can search by product class, by segment, by manufacturer for specific model number. We have the ability to filter out the list so that you're only looking at what we call active sales models, which are machines that you currently have in your sales cycle that you want your sales staff to quote on, only those machines, so they're not seeing everything. We also have the ability to look at just the machines and the data for your specific company, but we also have access to competitive data as well, so you can look at what's the other competitive machine going to cost in that same environment. We also have the ability to look for specific serial numbers or specific customers. So this tool will also allow you to reprice an existing customer under a DaaS model by simply looking them up in this tool and looking at the costs associated. In this particular example, I just picked a color printer doing 2,500 pages a month. My expected black and white to color ratio is 80-20. I didn't put anything in, that's just an example. And expected margin at 50%. Again, you can change that. You can set the system up to say, I want 48%, I want 52%. You define the margin. You also can define by model your supply costs. So if you're on an MPS strategy and you're using clones, or you're using Chris's products and you've got a different price than the average OEM price, you can specifically put in your supply CPC in this tool and it will price it out accordingly. In fact, we actually recommend that's what you do, because every dealer gets different QPA levels, purchase agreements, and the way they source their supplies. So using Chris's products is going to give you obviously the best potential price for that toner and for those parts, and that will help you reduce that CPC, which ultimately ends up translating to a lower rate for device as a service. So once I've selected this particular criteria, again, I didn't pick a model, I just picked a class of product, which is color printers. So that's particularly your A4s. What comes back as a function of that is going to be a list of devices. Now, in this particular example, I'm just picked one customer of ours that is testing this tool and using it in their pricing model. And you can see the cost variations on the far right side varies from $19 a month all the way up to $116 a month for that same 2,500 pages. Now, the two things that are driving this is one, supply cost, obviously, but two, efficiency of the operation to service it. So for example, if you picked up the Samsung and you've only got 5 of those machines in the field, the technicians undoubtedly are not going to be as efficient at servicing it as a machine that they see on a regular basis. So that cost efficiency gets driven back into the cost. So that's why you see that substantial difference in cost associated with specific volume. In this particular case, I'm just going to go to an Officio model. For this particular company, this Officio 430DN, in their company, they're doing 38% black, 62% color at 2,500 pages a month against their actual service cost. That machine is going to cost $83.57 a month. Now that's just for parts, labor, supplies, and margin. That does not include the cost of the machine. The bottom part of this slide is really showing you why we think this tool is the best way to go, because it's going to give you a confidence level on a population substantially bigger than your own. So in this particular dealer's case, they only have 74 of these machines in the field. Now, the blue checkbox on the far right means that we've assigned a confidence quotient to that number that says we believe that number is right based on other numbers. So part of that is the equivalent models. So for almost every machine in the field, it either replaced a model that was similar to it, it was the same chassis, they just tweaked it, added an accessory, changed the cover, changed the color. So we identify what are the equivalent models so that for a brand new machine entering the field, we have some history references to what cost looks like. We can also step back and look at our national statistics. So you can see we have almost 7,700 of those equivalent models, 4,600 of that exact model. And we can show you that that price everywhere else is very similar to your cost. So that gives you the confidence that if I do this, I'm in the ballpark. Now, if you were looking at this and it said your cost was $250 and everybody else's was $80, you might want to look deeper into what's causing and driving that excessive cost. Is that a supply issue? Is that a service issue? Is it a parts issue? What's going on that's creating that difference? But the system would then go, what? Nope, I don't believe that's the right cost. We need to look at something else. And you can actually change criteria right here in this window. So you can change your supply CPC, you can change your black and white and color ratios. But once I select a machine, I can literally build it right into a quote. So in this particular proposal, I picked the same model, but what I did was I changed the black and white and color expectation. So on the first machine on the list, I had 80-20, so 80% black, 20% color. That monthly cost was going to be $52.91. But on the next machine, I picked 40% black, 60% color, and that price went up to $82. So it's very surgical. So even within a multi-machine environment or a multi-machine proposal, you can specify what it is the expectation's going to be. And I could also do this by changing monthly volume. So I could say that the second machine on the list was going to do 5,000 pages a month instead of 25, and it would do it. So the price would be associated to that specific volume. Then you can export this as a PDF or CSV and build this into any other kind of tool that you might use for supply or for your sales department. So obviously we have the ability to do these evaluations. So if you're interested in it, we can do a no-cost evaluation of your company's performance and let you see this tool live using your data. So that you can actually see how it works and believe and have confidence that you're getting a number that will make you the margins that you need off of every piece of equipment that you have in the field. But it's also there to really help you look at things like inventory, stocks, and cost, your efficiencies, how your meter correction is working and how those are influencing it, et cetera. So there's a lot of information there. And again, this is a no cost or obligation free trial that we'll do to evaluate your company and show you what it is exactly we can do. So I've hit just a little over my 30 minutes, so I'd like to open it up for questions or comments.
And then Wes, do you have the chat panel open there? We do have a chat here from Corey. Do you see that?
I cannot see that, sorry.
Open the chat panel. I'll go ahead and read it to you for now. What is going to motivate customers to endure the headaches of printing less via rules-based printing if they are not going to see a savings due to their flat rate contract?
That's a good question. Obviously, customers are looking at reducing cost. And so if, as a partner, you're looking at this as an opportunity to say, look, this is the flat rate that we're going to propose to you based on your current situation. But if that situation changes, that cost might go down to a certain level. Obviously, we know that these machines tend to have what we call service legs, meaning they incur roughly the same amount of service, almost irrespective of volume to some degree. And that's why you see, when I showed the slide about the differences in page volume and how that it impacts cost, that's part of the driver for that, because we still see technicians going out there incurring callbacks and hold for parts. But I think that as a partner, if the customer is really actively wanting to reduce print through rules-based printing and they want to put up with that, that's fine. Most customers that we've talked to are happy just to get off meter billing in the first place and are happy with a fair play clause in the contract that allows you to audit and adjust it accordingly. That's just one option, much like paper cut or document management or print audit is a function of monitoring your customer's print base. Again, this is an opportunity to change the narrative in your marketplace and be one of the first ones to do that. Don't let the manufacturers lead with this or your competition lead with it, because it puts you in the mode of being defensive, whereas now you can create this new narrative about moving away from this and getting into a subscription model. If you're doing managed IT, start with your managed IT customers that have print first. And look at this as a way to consolidate that billing opportunity for them. It also simplifies your billing process, because now it becomes a reoccurring scheduled invoice every month that the customers get used to paying, and they're not having to audit it. They're not having to reconcile it, and it becomes just part of their pay system. And surprising how often that would just simply flow through as normal and without creating any questions. Whereas that change and reconciliation process often creates questions that force us to have to communicate with those customers in a different way.
And a question, if this webinar was recorded, and yes, we will have the link again that we'll be able to distribute.
And our contact information is here. My email is wes@beiservices.com. So please feel free to reach out to me if you'd like to have any other private conversations on this product later. Chris, I'd like to thank you very much for facilitating this. We had a great turnout, and I look forward to hearing from you.
My pleasure, Wes. I hope the webinar was informative to everyone and gave them an opportunity to think about some things here that that they can prepare for the future.